for clicking on the video. In this trek, we talked about tribes, and we're joined by Rabbi Ari Hart and philanthropic advisor Mackenzie Moritz. We talked about questions like, are tribes by nature competitive, and how do you use the word tribe? This was a great conversation to hop into after being gone for over a week and a half, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. So without further ado, here is the trek. Hello everyone and welcome to The Trek. The Trek is a Civics Unplugged series where community members participate in meaningful discussions on topics that are too often neglected when thinking about building the future. Through prompting questions and provocations, we venture together into complex but important conversations related to building the future and democracy. We understand that this work requires ongoing dialogue, but it's a journey worth trekking through. I'm Madison. I'm a high school senior from Verdigris, Oklahoma, joined by some of our community members and two special guests, which we'll hear from in just a moment. And tonight we are talking about tribe. We always start off with word association, so when you see your name on the screen, share the 1 to 3 words you associate with the topic and why.
Hello everyone, I'm happy to get us started. My name is Chobuka Pumba. I am 19 and a first year at the University of Toronto and a proud builder of this community. And when I think of the word tribe, what comes to mind is the word reoccurring. So throughout history, there's been some version of tribes, also like irrespective of communities or like geographic location, it's a reoccurring theme. And even today, it's something that takes place, whether you look at it through political parties or even just the idea of community. So it's obviously something that's integral to human nature and worth exploring.
I'm happy to jump in next. Hey everyone, my name is Ashley. I'm 17 from Vancouver, Washington. When I think of tribes, I think of belonging and centralization. I think belonging is pretty intuitive. I think of centralization just because I feel like there is like a negative side to tribes where like power gets centralized and people are all like saying and thinking the same things. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Julia. I'm 23 years old, currently in Pennsylvania. The first word that comes to mind is community, just because I find it pretty obviously synonymous with tribe.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm 15 and I'm from Virginia. And the word that came to mind was instinctual, because I think that, even today, if we don't have like formal tribes, when we go into a big room or something, we look for people who, we see ourselves reflected in. So I think it could be pretty instinctual to try to group together with people that we're similar with or we fit well together with.
Hi, my name is Thanasi, co-founder of CU, New York City. And I guess the one word that I use, I think Chabu said it, but integral, just because they have been around forever, and it's the one thing in human nature that kind of, I think is the foundation of everything else that we do as humans on the planet.
My name is Ari. I'm a rabbi here in Skokie, Illinois. Loving these insights. I want to say dark side, light side. I feel like there's a dark side of tribalism, tribalism, like some centralization of power, groupthink, exclusion, and I think a lot of us know about that and see that. And there's also a light side. There's like belonging and community. Oh no, I broke the rules. I'm sorry. Can we be like dark side, light side? Can we...
I was joking. It's okay.
I'm already breaking the rules. Yeah. So there's a darkness, and there's also like a tremendous positivity. And like I'm a rabbi in a community. Like there's a community of 300 families that make up my synagogue. So I'm very much in a tribe a lot, and I see some of the great positive things, and like I want that for everybody. So I have like ambivalent. You could say ambivalent. That could be my one word.
All right, I'm Mackenzie. I'm 37. I live in Washington, D.C., and I work in venture philanthropy. My 3 words are membership, rights, and responsibility. I think we choose which tribes we want to be a member of, or we perhaps can. I think that sometimes there are different rights that come with being part of a tribe. or any type of group. But finally, tribes are the kind of the groups that we feel responsible for, and also feel like we need to contribute in order to earn the rights through the responsibilities of being part of it.
Hey everyone, I'm Gary, also one of the co-founders. Called in from east side of New York City. I love the word venture philanthropy, by the way. I think it forces you to think about strategic investments. I think the word I will use is intoxicating. I think feeling like you're part of a tribe, like having a certain type of membership can, I can see how it could be also part of the light side, but often mostly associated. The word intoxicating is obviously has a certain connotation.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to like wrestle between the difference between like tribe and community, but I think for me initially what sticks out is like I feel like tribes have way more of a distinct culture than most communities. So like communities can be pretty broad, like I don't know, like the LGBTQ community, but like I see tribes of like as like having more, I don't know, just like more distinct culture. So I'd say culture would be my first one. And then an example of that would be like family. I see my family as a tribe. But yeah, thank you all for sharing those. Now we can go ahead and hop into the conversation. So does anyone have a question or provocation to get us started off with?
I have one, I guess. I think that mine is why do we put so much like emphasis on being a part of a tribe, and like why have humans just wanted to be part of tribes for so long? Because I feel like, there's a lot of things that give you the sense of community, and like, would you consider your friend group a tribe? Right, like there's smaller circles that are maybe not tribes, but still give you that sense of community. But we still all long to be a part of something bigger, and I wonder why. Maybe it's status, maybe it's protection, but I really wonder why that still is today.
I guess just to jump in, I mean, I think that, I struggle with what the definition is of the different terms. I think that perhaps tribe can mean different things at different points in history, and we might have an opportunity to redefine it for our generation and the next generation, should we want to. But I think there's a question around, are groups good or not? Is exclusivity good? Are there groups that membership is defined and fixed versus ones that people can opt into, and kind of are inclusive of more people growing? And I think that probably have a lot of different opinions about, where it's okay and where it's not okay to get different societal values from being parts of different groups based on how open they are to different memberships.
I think something is being raised, like the ethics of being in a tribe, right? Like I've been thinking about this a lot through the pandemic. Again, so there's 300 families in my community here. I don't know, you could call us a tribe. We know each other, right? It's like not family, but it's not just residents of the village that we live in. It's something in between. And it's been a really hard year for everybody. So like within the tribe, like we've done a lot of reach outs, like check in on people. There was a snowstorm, we shoveled people's snow, older members who were vulnerable. So I think about that, and like on the one hand, that's awesome. Like it's great those people had someone to shovel snow for them, and they were, these were people who really needed help. On the other hand, like, is it ethical to do something for your tribe that I wouldn't necessarily do it for like just a random person who lived in my village, and I wouldn't do it for a random person who lived in Arkansas, right? So it's like, what's our level of responsibility, and what's the fairness in like helping people that are in our tribe, but then like to the exclusion of people that are out of our tribe, and how do we navigate that?
I think that that's a really amazing question, because it makes me think to myself, in the absence of that tribe, would anyone be helping each other just because they could? In the same way that a tribe can be it can create a lot of horrible circumstances, and it has. I also think that it provides like a cultural incentive for people to step up in the ways that they can or the ways that are within their means. And so I think just because of like historical context, calling things a tribe has a negative connotation and usually associates with something bad that's happened. But at its essence, it is a community. I don't really see a distinction between the two. And so the validity of like there being a sense of community is always important, because I think it's yielded benefits, at least in the example that you gave.
I think there's a lot to do with like we throughout history have always like unified in communities based on a lot of physical and geographical like modifiers, right? Whether it be like skin color, race, religion, where you live. But I think it's interesting now that we see a lot of tribalism based on like ideas and views of the world, and I think that um, maybe those tribes are better in the long run. I think they will be, but in the short run, I think they've lend themselves to even more echo chambers. And I don't know how I feel about like I know that community is good, and I wonder if there is a distinction just based on like is tribalism a very negative thing, and can tribalism be very destructive when community is still very uplifting? I have no clue what the answer to that question is, but I feel like there could be a distinction based on the action of the tribe.
Oh no, I feel like ideological tribalism could be actually much worse. Like if at least if you're forming tribalism around like geography or people of like certain characteristics, like I don't know, like your race or religion, like there's still room for variation, but ideological tribalism really just does form an echo chamber. Um, but I don't know, there's certainly value in each. Maybe a question that I want to pose so that I think we're all kind of grappling with like exactly what the definition is. So maybe I would ask like, how do you use the word tribe, and like what are some tribes you are a part of, or you would consider yourself to be a part of?
I would think about sports and like sports fans in this way, like it's so weird. Like it's very tribal and people are connected and there's like, face paint and like, all kinds of really intense group. We go to this place and we all yell for this thing and we're all happy when this one thing happens and we're sad when this other thing happens. So there, I feel like there's lots of things in society that touch on that. Yeah, and I also would be curious to hear like what tribes people feel a part of. I mean, I feel like I'm definitely a part of my community tribe here, but I also have like online tribes, like like I go like my subreddits as those tribes, like that, and they do feel like that. They do hit those needs in certain ways, and maybe some tribes activate and provide for different things. I wouldn't count on my subreddit tribes to come and shovel my snow, but like maybe my physical tribe, I would.
Um, Ari's response reminded me of why I and I think most people gravitate towards tribes. So I'm kind of answering the previous question now, and I think it's quite simply. I think people want to not feel like the way that they exist in the world is crazy. I think that's a really big part for me. Like when um, I mean, the Civics Unplugged community is not very large with respect to what it will be, but just even having this current small community, I think it's helped me even feel like a word that we like to use a lot is like sanity check. Like, can you sanity check this document? Can you sanity check this idea? And I just wonder like what does it do to someone psychologically to not have reassurance that you're not crazy.
Right. And the flip is a tribe can make you do crazy things, because everyone's doing it. Like this week, it's about to be Passover, a big Jewish holiday. So like everyone here in my community is like going crazy cleaning their kitchens and like searching for leavened bread. It's like all these insane things that we do, which only makes sense because we're all doing it. But like if I just did it on my own, you'd be like, that's insane. That one's like a morally neutral one. We're cleaning a lot. Okay, fine. But like there are some pretty crazy things that people do in tribes that are like awful and horrible.
This is kind of going on tangent, but I think this circles back to what Tanasi said earlier about the idea of echo chambers, because part of the beauty of a tribe is the fact that you don't have to like almost explain yourself. Like there's a mutual understanding of where you're coming from. And so in the context of CU and like a healthier community, that means like when I'm really, really passionate and excited about something, I don't have to like, you know, rationalize it to a group of people. Like we can just kind of get to the meat of what we're trying to achieve. But again, it can also create that like slight echo chamber where it can allow people to do like really crazy things that aren't necessarily appropriate. And it would be good to have someone who doesn't necessarily like automatically agree with you and is more down to kind of question and reason through things.
So I guess then a question would be, it's probably unanswerable, but just want to get thinking, how do you like strike that balance then between like creating like a culture within a tribe where you have like that shared context and you're able to like work with that effectively, but where it doesn't turn into a sort of echo chamber? Like how do you balance those two extremes?
Well, I think that's where you like where the more physical tribes are valuable, because a physical tribe where it's based off of like your geography, that's not necessarily an echo chamber, because that's just like where people were. So there you're gonna have some conflicting ideas. And you could, and like in Ari's example about sports teams, you have the tribes of like sports fans, and you can, and if you're willing to, you can like bring up other ideas with those sports teams that aren't related to like the primary idea of that tribe. And so then you can have like um different opinions that can be valuable to kind of being like, is this crazy or not?
It's a great point. Like um if the founding like identity of a tribe is to believe in a certain thing, you're not going to get a lot of pleasant responses by challenging that those kind of founding principles. um, I guess just to kind of think about what we've been trying to do in the Civics Unplugged community is form sort of a tribe around avoiding the pitfalls of that's not all we do, right? But part of the identity is almost becoming like super reflective and humble and trying to avoid the pitfalls of dangerous tribes. So I think if that's part of the identity, it's a lot easier to avoid the pitfalls.
I think another thing is, encouraging or valuing people participating in multiple tribes or groups and bringing ideas from one to another. Just speaking for myself personally, I identify politically more on the progressive side, but I fear that, I'm only being exposed to one type of information. And so I intentionally participated in a fellowship with a conservative think tank and go and sit in rooms with people that all have different opinions than I do, because I find it really valuable to kind of hear the different perspectives and challenge assumptions and everything else. So I think being okay with tribe members or group members or however you want to use those words, participating in other groups and bringing those ideas back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why cults try and make people like commit their whole life to it, so they're not a part of any other tribes.
I think another thing that could like kind of help balance out the echo chamber thing is having a shared purpose instead of shared, like, I guess, ideologies. Because if you have the same goal, then you're going to have different ways that you want to get there, and then you have a little bit more diversity to work with. And maybe that strikes a middle ground between, physical traits and ideological ones.
I think it's quite interesting. Like we keep bringing up Civics Unplugged for this thing, but I think it's like, right, there's a shared vision in a bunch of different like nonprofits, right? I would call a nonprofit a tribe, right? It's just a bunch of people that are working for not a lot of money to progress a vision forward, right? Most of them at least. And so they all have a shared ideology, but there are, I think what Ashley said, there are systems in place that help people that have different ways of like achieving that end goal, like reconcile their differences and create a plan and go. I think the negative part comes in when there are no spaces for disagreement and everybody is just so devoted not only to the ends but the means, like one singular means of reaching that end. And that's how you have like um, just downward spirals. I think tribes have the potential to spark a lot of upward spirals, right? A good community will help every single person in it achieve what they want to achieve, both inside the community and outside the community. But a bad community, I think, will continue to drive people down their rabbit hole and pigeonhole them just because they have no way to hear opposing views and they like close themselves off from the world.
Something about the tribe too, which is like, I don't know if it's just from experiences like in summer camps or whatever, but like it feels there's like an inherent competitiveness in it sometimes. Like there's my tribe and there's that tribe. And like I want my tribe to win, and that's I think also where something with sports that certainly comes out, right? The teams hate each other. And that's also a place even you can even tolerate some dissent internally in the tribe, but like when it comes to that other tribe, like there's no argument that we want to beat them and be better than them. So I wonder like where that comes from and how that can be mitigated.
I think that's a good call out that like I would think that it's almost like a pillar of the idea of tribes that like above all else you do not resonate with like the other tribe or you do not allow for like intersectionality between tribes. And that's really, really compromising in terms of like when it comes to like creating echo chambers or even just healthy spaces that have to function within society.
I don't know. I mean, an amount of healthy competition can also be beneficial as well. I think that there's definitely a point where you're pushing it, where you're like, instead of you're not for something else, but you're just against that tribe. But like, being able to like say that, okay, our goal is to like produce more than this tribe or whatever, definitely like lights a fire under the members of your tribe that would technically benefit your team. But are we like, it works in some contexts, like in sports 100%, but if it's like a human ecosystem, it should be all the humans succeeding, not just single tribes.
Yeah, I'm having this memory from a summer camp, and it was like a great camp. Everyone got along, and then they said, "Okay, now it's color war." You guys ever have color war in your camps? Like the camp gets split, red and blue, and there's like these games, and it's so quick that you're just like, before it was one camp, we all hang out, and then it's like I have to destroy the blue. Like it's so powerful and dangerous. So maybe just being mindful that even talking about like within the tribe, like, hey, this is the thing which might happen in this tribe. We might feel like we have to beat the other tribes, like, and that can motivate us to do, to work hard. But like, we got to be really careful about that because it can be super dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all really comes down to like a scarcity mindset. So, like if you're talking about sports teams, only one team can win. So then it like incentivizes that competition. And I think, the same for literally anything else when there's like tribes, but it's like, oh, when we start to see humanity as like one tribe and we eradicate that scarcity mindset, we are able to work together. I think that is what really like drives us apart right now most of the time.
I think it also has a lot to do with like, because for me, like tribes are based a lot off of like identity for people. And so sometimes that can be oh, this is who we are. And other times it can be, this is what we're not. And so that can be kind of dangerous. But if you have it in like a sports environment where it's limited to, you have an hour to play this game or first person to get this many points, then like, it's limited and it gets to go away after the game. You can check it a lot easier than if it's like, doesn't have any checks or limits, whatever. I don't know.
I do wonder, like, if tribes are by nature competitive though. I think that, like, I don't know, like how I guess like how I like kind of differentiate community from tribe is that with tribe I get the connotation that like it's like a bunch of people like with so much like conviction and belief in something that they almost advocate for it like aggressively, and people organize into tribes to signal like what they believe to the external world. And so it's almost like competition is built into why people organize into tribes in the first place. It's almost like they're like trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, I agree with Ashley on that. Like the earliest tribes were like groups of people who got together because it was easier to find food and water if they worked together, and easier to outcompete other groups of humans if they worked together. So I think, yeah, tribes are like by nature competitively. And when Madison was like saying, "Oh, we'll be one big tribe of humanity," my immediate thought was, "Oh, good, we'll be one big tribe of humanity. Like now, it'll be us against the alien." And like the aliens don't exist yet, but like my like natural first thought when Madison said we're one big tribe of humanity is, okay, like who are we going to be against next? So maybe that's my mindset that's an issue, but that seems to be kind of like
That's interesting.
what the mindset is when with tribes.
Yeah, to Adam's point, I mean, if a tribe isn't collectively reflecting on what it is, what it stands for, and what is it sometimes healthily against, uh, and like kind of refining it over time, it'll I think just our lower angels will kind of take advantage of us. Um,
I think that it's just interesting. Like it kind of reminds me, Gary, conversation we were having around like the international expansion conversation of when you have to like focus on lower needs, you can't focus on like civic education when you have to figure out where you're getting your water from, or like if you'll have a place to sleep. So who cares about civic education at that point? But it's like when you have um, like when all of our needs as humans are fulfilled, right, we just have more time to focus on things that might not be like inherent, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but like could be like I have a need to like root for the sports team, or I have a need to fight against the aliens. And maybe I think tribes by nature, I think they are competitive, but I think we just as humans progress, we just get competitive over things that matter less like physically to our well-being like they used to, and more to like our intellectual stimulation and our egos and our outward branding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would argue that like right now I mean, I would agree with the characterization of like tribes having an inherent competitive nature, but that doesn't mean that it has to be competitive against like people. Like I think tribes can be against problems as well. Like we're going to not be against this like certain group of people, we're going to be against this problem, and we're going to like try and tackle it together, and the problem is the enemy, not like certain people.
That's a fair point, but a lot of the time the problem is people. Like I can think of very few examples where the problem isn't caused by some other group of people. Like the only examples I can think of are natural disasters. So often, even if you're trying to solve a problem, there's going to be another group of people who like don't want that problem solved or are the like cause of that problem, and so then you're going to be against another group of people.
or or maybe to nuance that, it's really easy to identify scapegoats of a problem that you're facing, even if there's no one group that entirely contributed to it.
I think there are multiple sides of every problem. Like if we count problems like societal issues, I think there are multiple sides, and I think that at least throughout history, there's always been groups that have been perpetuating either like climate change, right? You can even argue that COVID was a some people had a hand in creating the COVID pandemic. You can definitely argue that some people had a hand in perpetuating it, but there's always that tribe or group of people, scapegoat or not, that are actively perpetuating issues. So I kind of agree with Adam's point on this one. I think there is always a group of people that are perpetuating problems.
Right, but oftentimes it may not be like either that's not how they see themselves, or maybe because they're trying to solve for a different problem, right? So like, I'm, raiding your village to take your food because I don't have any food in my village, right? So it's perpetrated by a person, and the problem is I don't have food, but there's maybe a deeper underlying problem that, neither of us have food. And if we like worked together and got out of the zero sum mindset, and we could just see ourselves and got out of the my tribe, your tribe, one of us is going to be hungry, or like all of us can eat. And it's, it's interesting, like we are tribal, and there are like humans that do bad tribal things, but also like there are 8 billion people that are living on the planet in some kind of tribal, different degrees of tribalism. And there are horrible things that do happen, but like also it sort of works. Like, we're here, we're functioning, and it's, I don't know.
Great points.
I think I have a question that's a little bit more future thinking, if we're up to it. But do you think that as we go on, the things that we unite over become a lot more broad to the point where we can achieve that whole like one tribe idea of we're all, like everybody does eat? Or do you think we'll always be kind of sectioning ourselves off into multiple different tribes?
Well, I think that, one of the interesting things of the past few decades is that technology has changed how we're able to interact, completely. So as before, maybe only geographic-based tribes were possible. Now you can kind of create not only really niche tribes, but tribes with, whole planet global reach. And, so I think that there's more exploration to be done there. And there could be some really interesting things that come from, there may be only one person in this community that cares about, protecting this one species, but unite all those one people in all the different communities, you could do something really cool. But in terms of uniting all of us into one tribe, I do think it's going to take, to the chat, like the aliens or the multiplanetary or the something, where we feel like, oh, we all need to rally around this crisis or this opportunity and come together as one. Otherwise, it feels like people maybe have a desire for, either a smaller group that they can wrap their head around, or one where they can see themselves in very clearly. And I feel like if you put everyone into one bucket, then perhaps people don't have as strong of identity connection to it, because it's kind of defined so generically that they don't see a tight connection there.
Yeah, when I hear this question, I think of like the couple of times in American history where like one political party has died off, and it's basically been just like one political party in like all of America. And so like you could say for those like couple of years or months or whatever, like the country was united in some sense because there was really only one surviving political party. But all of those times, like it's been too broad, or like not everyone's been satisfied with that, and you've had like breakups, or you like other parties break off, and over time you like coalesce again into like one or two parties. But it feels like what Mackenzie was saying, if you have something that's so broad that everyone can be a part of it, you're going to have people who also want something like more specific or something different, and so they're going to break off and form their own like tribes.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that like they have to be like mutually like exclusive. It's not like we're just one big like tribe of humanity. Like maybe we feel more like a tribe as a whole, but there's still like tribes within humanity that aren't necessarily ones that are like negative. Like I mentioned, like in the word association with like my family, and I would imagine there'd still be like smaller tribes within people's communities as well. So maybe there's just something that makes us all feel more united than we do right now.
Yep. So on that note, I have a question. What are the impediments to a near universal sense of solidarity?
I think that there's a lot of like, I think also it's just interesting, like when we talked about a one world tribe, like everybody's mind went to like uniting against aliens or uniting against an attacker. And so I feel like it was Nelson Mandela, but someone talked about uniting around love, and I bet a lot of people have talked about that throughout history. But like, I wonder if the real key to solidarity is uniting for something instead of uniting against something, because you can fight the aliens all you want, but is it more powerful to say we want to build a society that's like equal and just and gives everybody bread?
So
sound very communist there.
So I'll just add on to that. So if people are trying to achieve solidarity by painting a vision of the future, it has to seem like it's plausible to people and like we're actually getting there. And what has the story of inequality been over the past 12 months? What has the story of inequality been? And I was thinking, as a lot of people on this call were talking about like food and basic necessities, once that's covered, people are still going to think about inequality. So, and I guess I didn't connect the dots as much until this call, that's going to continue to create instability if we don't do something about that.
Like, just in the realm of thinking about this, like a vision that is plausible, I don't think that we want to insinuate that in order for us to like thrive as a society, there can be no tribes, or like the one tribe has to be the one that rules out. Like, I don't think that society is geared towards that. I think that people are going to naturally gravitate towards having collectives within themselves. So what I think of is the saying that I want to see everyone eat, but just like not at my table. And so I think that there's a way to meet in the middle, of like allowing people to continue to like have those communities that they're deeply invested in, but still at the end of the day, the bottom line is that everyone has what they need to survive, if that makes sense. And that includes things like addressing inequalities.
Kind of going off of that too, like I guess if we could get to the point where you look at a person and you just respect them because they're a human being, instead of like, you don't have to like them, I guess. Sort of like what you were saying about like, you don't have to, they just want you to have food, don't need to eat at my table, was like, maybe if we have a whole bunch of different tribes, that's okay, as long as we're just still not tapping into that like super aggressive competitive nature that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like design objectives versus design choices. And for like Ari and Mackenzie, it's like the way we kind of think of things here is we create a table of like objectives of whatever we're trying to create, and then choices that we make that fulfill those objectives. But I think that in order to create this vision of the future, right, it needs to be broad enough so that people can see the objectives and then make the connections of how they would fulfill it themselves, right? So objective is like happiness. Happiness is different to everybody, right? But the overall like need to be happy is still there. So I think it's just, creating that broadness that people can just fill in the lines with whatever's in their mind.
I think I'd jump in too and say that I think, one, what you all are doing is super inspiring, but two, I think it's important that the vision for the future that you come up with is inspiring as well, to get a bunch of other people to join. There was a period in my life where I spent a lot of time thinking about climate change, and so much about climate change is around scaring you about what's going to happen and feeling like you need to sacrifice a lot in order to solve it. And there's some people that are into that and they're like, I'm never going to fly again. But you're not going to get everyone with that, right? I was like, capture me with the inspiring story of electric airplanes and whatever else, and like how we could still have vacations and things. And so I think one of the things is figuring out how do you create a vision for the future that not only solves the problems that we have today, but it kind of involves some like innovative new approaches, where people feel like that they're not necessarily like the only way to solve it is one group sacrifices and another group benefits, and that's how it equalizes. But we're figuring out a more exciting thing that everyone can get excited about for the future.
Amazing point.
I too get frustrated by the climate change movement a lot, because like in Union Square in New York City, they have a clock that counts down the time until the world like blows up, but you know, it's pushing that negative message on a bunch of people who aren't really contributing to the climate crisis, when we should be pushing a message towards, you know, corporations. We also push the message to corporations that they have to totally lose all their economic revenue to fix the climate crisis, when that might not necessarily be true. And so I think that we can meet people where they are and bring them to where they need to be, versus to tell them that they need to abandon their way of life to come to like a brighter future that they can't even envision. They don't really care about. Like, if you can't feed your family, why the hell should you care about human flourishing? Or why the hell should you care about a kid in Uganda who can't go to school? Like, there's no reason. But if you can match everybody where they're at, I think it's beneficial for all of society.
All right, any final thoughts before we move on to reflection? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and copy the link to the notes and send them in the chat. And while you all are looking at it, I can go ahead and get us started with the reflection. So, I mean, until Ari brought it up, I wasn't really thinking about the competitive nature of tribes. But now I'm realizing anytime there is the slightest hint of a tribe, people like utilize the opportunity to like pit them against each other. Like, I think of things like in high school, like they have like the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior class, and we would have like competitions like between the classes and stuff like that. And like anytime I've been a part of a tribe, there has been some sort of like competition amongst another one, which is kind of crazy to think about. And so that's definitely something that I'm thinking about more coming out of this conversation.
I think that's a really good point. And something that I guess I'm thinking about is just, I know a lot of our conversation was centered around like one human tribe, but I guess I'm almost wondering, like, you know, is that even the right goal? Like, do we like want one tribe, or do we want many tribes that allow for nuances in people's thinking and their identities? And I guess like I just also think about how like it's hard to feel like true belonging and care like when you're in a tribe that's like millions of people. Like, I mean, like even just Dunbar's number, like at like you can only have certain number of like really meaningful relationships at like at once. And you know, like I feel like too often like tribes dominate the narrative instead of like the lived experiences of individuals being at the center of the narrative. And so I just, yeah, I guess like I'm just thinking about like, do we like want one big tribe, or like is that even the right goal?
On that note, you know, Ashley and I have talked about how we should probably, as a society, think more about basically fractal patterns that, okay, how do I explain this? So like you yourself can be flourishing, right? And that spirit of flourishing can characterize like a small group of people, like your family, like your nuclear family or whatever, right? And it can also characterize like your village that you live in, right? It can also characterize the nation that you live in, etc. So, what is the spirit of a tribe that we want to see at every level, right? And anyone that has, I would say, like most people have to figure out how to deal with the tribe in their own brain. Like there's often a lot of conflicting voices, and for me, just learning to appreciate the dissent in my own head and come up with like useful processes for charting a path forward for my own life. Like when I say fractal patterns, I'm like, for any group of any size, that's useful, right? Chart a vision for your future, walk a path, and iterate from there. So,
Gary, do the voices in your heads also have names, or are they just
Thanasi.
Oh God. I think my reflection is among the same vein of like, I think that there are, it's an interesting thought of like having one world tribe, but I think that there are tribes at different levels, and I think that we technically can achieve like a unified front of humanity with a bunch of different tribes like underneath it that just aren't warring with each other. Like I think sports are a great example of how humans who are alike in a lot of different ways can be in tribes and mostly not be negative towards each other, unless you're like a Yankees fan and you throw like sodas at people for fun. But I think that if we can get rid of the negative causes of why people in tribes war with each other, I think we can move forward towards that solidified vision of humanity.
So before I forget, just because this keeps coming up with like tribes and competition and rules, what I think what this conversation has revealed to me is that competition could be a lot healthier. Like competition tends to be pretty healthy if the people that are competing agree to the same set of rules. And I think our current state of politics in America, people don't, it's just like at all costs, right? Do whatever at all costs. And there's also no boundaries of our politics now, right? It kind of, it's sort of seeped into every part of our lives. And I think a big concern of all sorts of people is like that the one thing that was sacred that wasn't infected by this like zero sum war is going to be tainted by the way our politics works. So and I think when people talk about our economy with like, you know, business concentration of power, often people are talking about like how small businesses in giant corporations, they play by different rules. So I thought this was really thought provoking on that note about games and rules.
I really enjoyed this track, and I think that it also kind of brings up the important conversation of like there are things that are within human nature that are more likely to like almost like result in bad things or make us more susceptible to creating new challenges. And so just the idea of like kind of reconciling with those characteristics and like being aware of them, I felt like this conversation on tribalism really did that. um, and then also kind of made me think of like what are the inherent reoccurring themes in humanity and how can we not ignore them or pretend like they don't exist but kind of address them actively. So thank you for the conversation.
I'm also thinking about a lot. Just a thought that I'm thinking about at this moment is like the spectrum: family, tribe, village, city, nation, community, movement, right? Like, and what would it be like? Maybe tribalism could be healthier if you always situate it in that spectrum, right? Because I think a lot of like the danger is when the tribe becomes everything, my tribe versus your tribe. But if you can say like, yeah, I've got my tribe and I'm proud of my tribe and my tribe is great, but it's situated within humanity. Or the other way, like I've got my tribe is great, but like I've also got my family, and that's even more important, right? So like kind of trying to put it along the spectrum.
I'm leaving feeling like, oh, go first, Sam.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna say I love what you were saying. And I guess a takeaway for me based off of mostly that actually is maybe instead of trying to like be a part of tribes, be a part of like, I don't know, mini communities. And, you know, if we want like a healthy competition, then we can add tribal aspects to it without actually making it a tribe where there's maybe too much competition. So like for a sports team, you can be a community hanging out outside of the court or the field or whatever, but then still be able to be competitive but still respectful. So like balancing community with aspects of tribalism, I guess.
Yeah, I would say my reflection on this is like a lot of one of the main things that like leads into the I guess not competitive nature, where you get from like the competitive nature, kind of like what Gary was saying, where you get from the competitive nature to like the no rules, like zero sum games is like when you lose respect like for the other side. And so I think just, and that's what you're saying about like everyone being equal to, like just trying to ensure that like everyone respects each other. I think that's a part of how you kind of eliminate some of the competition.
I'm leaving kind of realizing I need to do a lot more reflecting on what the word tribe means to me. And, one of the things I'm curious to reflect on is whether tribes are kind of value neutral and can be used for good or bad, or if they are inherently good or bad. And I think regardless, one of the questions for me in thinking about the structures of the future is, are there any good aspects to them that we would want to carry forward to not throw the baby out with the proverbial bathwater? One of the things that always fires me up is how we create structures that allow people to come together to accomplish big things that they couldn't accomplish by themselves. And I think that this has been a mechanism historically that has accomplished some good and accomplished some bad. But as we think about ways to kind of create more structures for coming together to do more good than bad, what can we learn from history?
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. Just to kind of like close this off, Ari, Mackenzie, and Adam, I know this was your first trek, so would love to hear what you thought about the trek overall.
Do you guys do this every week? This is awesome.
We do it a couple times a week, yeah. This is number 49.
It's so great. Like, there's so few spaces like this to just like think big about ideas, and not in a tribal context, not in like a we have to advance this particular objective, just to reflect. And it's amazing. The whole world should be doing this.
What's cool is that we're all part of very different tribes as well, to point to that.
One of my favorite things to participate in is called the Socrates program at Aspen, the Aspen Institute, which is a think tank here in DC. But they have these Socratic conversations on some of these timeless questions that happen over time. This feels a lot like the spirit of that, in that you all started with a word, and then it just went from there, and kind of are exploring all kinds of different angles. But I think inherently with this angle of what can we do to work towards a better future, it just gives me tremendous hope for the future, and I'm just so grateful that all of you are taking this on. And I think it's really cool that you've invited different guests to come and be guest members of your conversations, because I think the echo chambers are so much a part of the problem, and so creating spaces for different people to jump in and participate is super cool. I think I do the like system thinker in me is like, well, how does this all come together at the end? Like, I want to fast forward and figure out like the great society that you all plan. But I know that the process is working. But I'm really thrilled to follow along and see where it goes. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this, like what Mackenzie and Ari said, this is super cool. And yeah, one of the problems like I've had is that like no one's willing to communicate about like issues really, and so this just being a room where people can like communicate about issues and kind of like try and like trek through them together is super cool and like a really awesome thing.
Bonus points for Adam.
Yeah, for using the trek language. Love that. Well, thank you all for coming. It was a great conversation. I've been gone for the past week and a half, so this was very refreshing for me, jumping into another trek. But yeah, you all are welcome to come to another one, of course, whenever you want. Just let Gary know. And thank you all for your time. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.